they needed some help, so they created a primitive species, which they weren't supposed to do, and they abused the species to work for them and enslaved them, and then things went wrong, and the species evolved into what we are today, not knowing where we are, where we come from, completely confused and lost in this vast universe.
I totally agree.
And no wonder we're so psychotic as a species. You know, if we don't know where we come from, don't know who we are, we don't know where we're going, how could we possibly be able to put together any rational thoughts of survival and cohabitation when we're constantly fighting with each other about our personal beliefs of our origin? And I must tell you, Michael, that this is part of my new philosophy, which I call contributionism, which you'll be reading a lot more about in the near future as well, which is really a new blueprint for a new world order, which I like to use the new world order to steal the thunder away from the Illuminati. So it's really a new social structure that functions without money and without the idea of barter or trade. And it's a phenomenal new look at how we should be living, but how money was introduced maliciously to confuse us and enslave us without, enslaving us physically. But once again, I lost my train of thought. I go down these tangents.
Well, I just pulled up a David Icke quote because you were talking about him a while ago, and this is exactly your research and what we're talking about. I believe this is from David Icke. I believe that the human race has developed a form of collective schizophrenia in which we are not only the slaves to this imposed thought behavior, but we are also the police force of it.
That's exactly. I mean, that's absolutely beautiful. Yeah.
And
listen to what you were saying earlier about your friends or people that are at university and they think highly of their own education levels. Little do they know that they're becoming the police force that David Icke refers to. They're becoming the custodians of the lies because they feel privileged that they have been given this advanced education at university. And that's exactly how it works. It is such a beautiful model. What you do is you give people a little bit of ego, you boost their ego, and then next thing they think they know it all. And they forget that the more you learn, the less you know.
Exactly. And about ancient astronaut theory, what we were talking about a while ago, we can already be the God with the lowercase g because we can already clone. Just think about if we went to Mars. We could if we wanted to, if we weren't trying to kill each other and try to worry about the economy and everything like that. Well, we can already go to Mars and create life, and I guess you can say create man in our image and after our likeness, and create life there.
That's exactly what we do. I mean, I think I sketched that scenario in my book, Slave Species of God. Imagine if we were going to send a group of people to Mars to colonize Mars and create a colony that maybe we want them there because there's a mineral there. We want to mine a specific mineral and send that mineral back to Earth. And in fact, that's what's going on. We're looking for specific rare earth minerals, okay, on Mars and probably on the Moon as well when we eventually get there. I don't know if we ever got there or not. That's still $1 million question.
I doubt it too.
Yeah. So imagine if we send a small group of people. Let's say we're going to send 100 people to Mars, right? And they've got all different skills. Those are the scientists, those are the builders, the constructors, the engineers, those are the guys that prepare the food and look after everybody, make sure they can survive, and so forth. And so everybody plays a very important role. Everyone's role is crucial and pivotal to the survival of that group. Okay? Mm-hmm. Now imagine after a number of years, you suddenly, they start procreating and they grow to 1,000 people and so forth. And let's say, at which point do you now start saying to the people, okay, well, since you're a scientist, you're worth much more to us than the guy that prepares the food. And we're now going to create this thing called money, and we're now going to start paying you money because we believe we need to reward you based on the value that you're adding to the society there. At which point do you do that and introduce that concept? I mean, it's insane. It's an insane concept, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And I totally agree with all of that. But the thing that puzzles me, and it's a really good question. Whenever I bring this research up, your research, Zechariah Sitchin's research about ancient astronaut theory, and the main thing is like, well, how can they get here? How could these beings travel here? And I'm speechless because I really don't know what to say, because I don't know if it's in some kind of spiritual way or some kind of physical way. Like they actually come here in craft, which that's what I believe, but I don't know. And I was just wondering if you can help me try to figure that out.
Yeah, look, there's definitely ways of traveling beyond the speed of light. There's no question about that. But people that still believe that you can't do that are not well informed. Okay, and there are various ways of doing that. The most obvious way of doing that is by dematerializing and rematerializing. Now, that might sound like science fiction, but believe me, it's not. Once again, look at Star Trek. They've been doing it for 40 years, showing us how people can dematerialize and rematerialize in another place. Well, that's exactly what happens. Now, to understand that a little bit better, you need to first understand a bit about physics and science, and especially the very confusing area of quantum physics. Okay, now, we've been wrapped up in this thing called Newtonian physics, right? Every action has a reaction, and matter is physical, and we have atoms that create molecules, and molecules create the structure, and then we have the physical thing of metal or wood or glass or whatever, and it's a physical body. It's right there. We can look at it. But that's not what you get when you get into quantum physics and subatomic study of subatomic particle behavior. In fact, it's completely the opposite. In fact, the most important scientific experiment in the last 100 years is what's referred to as the double slit experiment, where you take a single particle and you fire it at two slits, right? Yeah. Let's say a photon. You fire a photon at two slits made in a piece of paper, and there's only one particle. The particle has to choose one of the slits to go through. Well, guess what happens on the other side? The other side shows that the particle didn't go through one of the slits. It actually went through both slits at the same time. So what has now happened is that the guys that study quantum physics start losing their mind, because everything they've ever been told is a lie. Mm-hmm. And that's the beautiful thing about science. It really pushes us to the boundary of what we would normally call science fiction. Well, it's not. So what has now happened is that we now know that particles and subatomic particles, electrons of atoms, actually exist in what's referred to as non-locality. They can exist not just in more than one place, but in many places at the same time. They exist in what's known as wave forms. And that is a beautiful example. The reason I brought this up, because that's a beautiful example of what a lot of physicists and scientists talk about, crossing over from space-time into time-space. Okay, now we exist in space-time. Space. We have space around us, three-dimensional space. We can look up in the universe. Everything is three-dimensional, right? Yeah. The moment you cross over the barrier of quantum physics into the subatomic realm, you cross over into time-space, where the physical form disappears, and you can exist. Your entire being can exist in many places at the same time, and 3D space becomes linear, while 3D time becomes three-dimensional, or time becomes three-dimensional. And that's what we refer to now as a crossover point. When you die, what do? You cross over. Mm-hmm. So it could also be called as a wormhole or whatever, or the crossing over from the present to the divine. And I guess that's sort of what happens when you die, where your soul goes back to the source, goes back to the divine, and exists in space-time. The realm of the divine being, the divine creative force, the divine creator of all these incredible things, resides not in this three-dimensional physical universe, but in three-dimensional time, where all things can happen simultaneously. And it seems that this three-dimensional universe that we live in is just a projection